Hello again, and welcome to the Hyper-V Security Essentials for the Infrastructure Admin webinar. This live event will be recorded, and we will provide you with the video and slides a few days after the webinar. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat window, and we're going to do Q&A at the end of the webinar, so prepare your questions. Also, please check the handout section. We have attached a copy of our slide deck. In case it doesn't work, please contact me directly, and we'll fix that. So we are ready to start. Our speakers today are Alex Karvanov and Simon Perryman.
Thank you for the introduction. Welcome to this webinar. Over the course of the next hour, we're going to be taking a look at a variety of different best practices all around Hyper-V security. And we're going to be specifically tailoring these people for these best practices towards non-security experts. So really looking at people that are virtualization administrators, infrastructure admins, and those that just aren't necessarily experts around security. We're going to help you understand exactly what you need to do to really protect your Hyper-V environment. We'll quickly introduce ourselves. I'm Simon Perryman, Vice President of Business Development here with Five9, and I spent 8 years with Microsoft prior to joining Five9 and starting this role. I got to split my time between the actual engineering team, where I built a lot of these Hyper-V virtualization and high availability technologies, and then 4 years as a technical evangelist, becoming the worldwide virtualization lead for a variety of different data center technologies for Microsoft. I'd also like to introduce Alex Karvanov. He's our Director of Solutions Engineering, and he's been with Five9 Software for several years. As one of our main technical resources, Alex is responsible for working with a variety of our customers across lots of different sales and proof of concept opportunities to help people understand all the technical benefits here that Five9 Cloud Security can provide. And Alex is going to be helping me with Q&A throughout this webinar, as well as providing some demos. So if any questions come up, whether they're best practices for Five9, whether they're related to Hyper-V or just virtualization in general, please don't hesitate to ask. We'll be happy to address your questions as we go through the event, as well as at the end. So first of all, we're going to do a quick introduction to ourselves, talk a little bit about how we've designed our security solutions. Then we're going to focus on best practices around virtualization security. First, kind of give you an introduction to the different types of threats that are out there, how they go and attack virtualized infrastructures, and then all the different best practices around really designing your virtualized infrastructure to protect you against these common threats. Now, it's important to note that all of these best practices we're going to be talking about are actually applicable to all virtualized environments as well, not just Hyper-V. So we really are trying to offer best practices even if you're a VMware admin or Citrix and one of those other hypervisor solutions. But of course, we are going to be focusing and tailoring everything towards the Hyper-V solution set. Now, a little bit more about Five9. We were founded in 2009, being launched since right after Hyper-V was first released, as we're a solution that's built entirely on Hyper-V technologies. We are located in Chicago with 13 regions worldwide. We have been hiring very rapidly growing our global footprint that we'll talk about shortly. And we now have over 68,000 Hyper-V users globally. And these are customers of all different types of sizes, from SMBs all the way up to some of the largest organizations in the world. We, in fact, have recently onboarded 8 Hyper-V and System Center MVPs to join our team as technical evangelists. So I believe unofficially we have one of the most number of MVPs part of our organization, so we're pretty excited about that. And I think that's a good reflection of how popular our technologies are becoming over the past 6 months, over the past year, since we're rapidly expanding so fast. And we've had the ability to have so many MVPs become involved with our company and our solutions. As we take a look at our global footprint, we are headquartered in Chicago, and these are the other points of presence that we have around the world, where we have some local representation. And as you can see, we've covered Europe, North America, and started to expand in South America. Over the next 6 months, we're going to continue to grow our footprint, and we're in the process of hiring other resources throughout Central and South America, Western Europe, as well as Asia Pacific. And so what this should mean to you is that no matter where you are located as one of our customers, hopefully we're going to be adding a local resource near you so they can help you with local issues. They can work with you on local compliance laws, and hopefully they'll be able to see you at some of the local events as well. So please keep your eyes out for Five9 as we continue to expand worldwide. Now, we also are increasing the number of webinars that we're producing. We, in fact, started several new partnerships with several different companies, including VDI companies, hardware companies, other software companies. So we have a lot of joint presentations coming up over the next couple of weeks. And if you visit five9.com or five9.com/webinars, you'll see a complete list of our upcoming events. Now, we do have three main products. We're going to be focused on our security product. We also have a VMware to Hyper-V conversion tool. So if you are running in a hybrid environment or you're thinking about making a move from VMware over to Hyper-V, check out this free migration tool. Gives you a nice, easy way to copy your virtual machine's configuration files and data files with the streamlined wizard-based process. And then our other product, which is actually our most popular one based on downloads, is Five9 Manager. And Five9 Manager is kind of like a lightweight version of System Center. It has many of the same features as Virtual Machine Manager and Operations Manager, but it's about 1/10 the cost. So it's really designed for SMBs that, for whatever reason, can't use System Center, can't afford it, don't need everything that's included, as a way to have a single centralized management and monitoring solution for all of their virtualized environments. So if you want to learn more, please check out five9.com/manager. Now let's move on to the technical portion of this webinar and take a look at our best practices as we introduce you to virtualization security. So let's take a couple moments and take a look at some foundational information here. Now first, we're going to talk about some different types of security threats for virtualized environments. And these are really the most common ones that these types of threats try to exploit. Now, the first one is trying to exploit or trying to consume all of the compute resources, such as denial of memory attacks or denial of CPU attacks. And so this is going to happen if you don't have some maximums that are assigned to certain virtual machines. There's certain types of viruses and threats that will continue to consume more and more memory until that single virtual machine is trying to take up all of the memory on the host. So it's important that even if you use things like dynamic memory or memory ballooning if you're using VMware, it's still important to try to set some type of maximums on them. Make sure that you're not using an arbitrarily large value. The next type of threats that you're going to see are things which attack the network. Now, you're probably familiar with these first couple of ones, you know, the viruses, malware, Trojan horse. Those are basically files that you're going to copy through your network that do disruptive things to your environment. And they can cause other types of attacks, such as memory starving attacks. Now, the most common type of network attack that we see, though, are denial of service attacks. And this is where the network gets overwhelmed by requests that blocks normal communication from going through. And you might see this with things, you know, such as websites or someone trying to access a SQL database. If that type of traffic cannot get through the network, it's going to cause communication to break down. It can trigger false alerts. It can trigger false failovers in a cluster and cause general disruption in the environment. Storage attacks are relatively common as well, since data is such a valuable commodity in the IT world. Now, data breach and data loss, that's pretty common things that you hear about oftentimes, right? And in fact, when somebody does get hacked, when credit card information gets stolen, that usually makes the news. And you want to make sure that you're not those guys that have made the news for having one of these attacks, because that really hurts the reputation of the business, especially if you're a service provider that's trying to keep people online, is trying to host other people's information or resources. So threats to storage are pretty big. And another type of threat that we often see is a denial of data attack. And so this is essentially blocking access for customers to actually consume the data, access their SQL database, get the information they need. So it's basically flooding the storage area network, blocking access to resources, which is slowing down performance for all of the VMs. Now, the one that you've probably heard about the most as far as threats go are denial of service attacks to websites. And this is where your public-facing portal, where customers can go access your data, they can do their online banking for you, they can do their core services through the website. That's when they don't have access to that website because that particular web server is getting attacked, it's getting overwhelmed. So we want to have some best practices in place that really prevent these different areas, these different layers being attacked. Now the biggest one that people are becoming more and more concerned about are advanced persistent threats, known as APTs. And in fact, this has become such a major problem that our CEO, Satya Nadella, he even highlighted this during the Ignite conference keynote, talking about how problematic these were becoming. Now, advanced persistent threats, these are basically attacks which are intelligent. It's not just things that are going to constantly do a brute force attack and try to crack every password. What it's going to do is they're going to understand how certain types of infrastructure are configured, including how Hyper-V is configured, or how VMware is configured, or how Citrix is configured, and specifically try to go and exploit vulnerabilities in those systems. So they're going to do things such as spoofing system data or spoofing security data. It's going to create fake DHCP addresses and route customers to the wrong location. It's essentially going to do these kind of advanced threats that are harder to detect, harder to find, often distributed. And for this reason, these are the most concerning ones because they're essentially intelligence attacks. So what you really want to think about is how can you provide security that's going to protect all of your virtualized resources, because the reality is each individual component can be attacked, and each of these components are part of a larger system. When one of the pieces goes down, it can really impact overall service availability. So how do you actually get a virus into your environment? Well, virtualized environments, especially if you're a hoster or a service provider, and you allow the public to access your virtualized environment, they're really never going to be secure. You've got to think about, having end users, having tenants that are accessing these VMs. And most of your customers probably aren't security experts, or they probably don't care about security. So in many cases, they'll just turn it off or ignore it. You've got to think about storage devices that get plugged in. You've got to think about different types of data that get sent over the network, such as file attachments, screenshots. You've then also got to worry about threats that haven't yet been identified that could be in your environment. So think about this. You could have downloaded some files a month ago. The files could have a virus in them, but there simply wasn't a signature. Nobody knew that this virus existed yet. It lay dormant. Because a lot of these viruses, they're going to have what's known as a time bomb or a logic bomb, where after certain conditions are met, or as soon as the new year shows up, the virus suddenly turns on, and it starts wreaking havoc in the environment. And so for that reason, many of these viruses just stay dormant. They're unprotected in your data center. And the scary thing is, the reality is, a lot of your data centers are probably already infected. In fact, Gartner released a report about 2 months ago that said they estimate 80 to 90% of all data centers contain malware already. No matter how secure you are, how protected you are, there are threats there. So we really want to give you a solution here as a best practice that's going to give you real-time or proactive monitoring, but also give you the ability to go and scan your existing infrastructure, trying to find threats that may already exist. So the tools that you're going to think about as part of your arsenal for protecting yourself are, first of all, a virtualized firewall. And a firewall is simply going to look at things such as the network packet, take a look at different protocols, different sources, destinations, and choose whether it allows the network packet to go through or not. You want to make sure that you have antivirus and anti-malware. And so essentially the way this works is you go and take a look at your files. You go and compare those files to a list of master files, a list of viruses, a list of malware, which are known as signatures or definitions. And if you have a file that matches one of these signatures or definitions, you likely are infected and have this type of malware. So you want to make sure that we're really trying to use a centralized repository and stay current, making sure that we have the latest malware, the latest virus information available from some of the top vendors. And this gives us the ability to even filter network traffic as it comes in to try to do any matching for these viruses or malware definitions. Now, there's a whole new class of protection known as intrusion detection and intrusion prevention. And what IDS and IPS does is it often looks for anomalies within your traffic. So with intrusion detection and intrusion prevention, what's actually happening is you're going to have multiple endpoints in your environment that are reporting data. So for example, all of your Hyper-V hosts, all of your virtual machines, they're having different types of traffic that's going into them and out of them. And over time, we get to see what we call a normal traffic pattern. But if we start to see anomalies in that, unusual spikes, different protocols, different endpoints being used, we're going to go raise an alert and say, hey, there might be something that's happening in your environment. You want to go check this out. Now, these three features are key to having with virtualized environments, but that's not the only security that you're going to need in your data center. You still need to follow traditional best practices because what we're really focusing on here is doing security for the virtualized layer. That's the Hyper-V hosts, the virtual machines, and all those virtualized resources running on them. But of course, you still need the physical security in your data center, VPN, Active Directory for identity, and following all those traditional security best practices as well. Well, what we're going to do here as part of this next section is really walk you through everything that you want to think about when designing your virtualized environment to try to make it as secure as possible, giving you best practices around prevention, antivirus, malware, disk scanning, and showing you different solutions that can help you achieve those. So our biggest thing that you want to think about with a virtualized environment is that it's different than traditional security. And the biggest reason why is that virtual machines, virtualized resources have to be dynamic. Now think about that, right? If you kind of think about IT in the past, you would have a couple of static servers. They often wouldn't change, or if they did, the IT department was heavily involved. There wasn't this concept that we see today with these dynamic virtualized environments when all of a sudden a new VM might appear. And especially if you're a host or a service provider, that VM may have been created by an end user that you had no interaction with. And then they might create virtual disks that we need to protect and make sure that we're scanning. Those can be dynamic. Virtual networks that we need to protect and inspect to make sure that security threats aren't spreading through them. And of course, virtual switches to make sure that we're not sending those virtual threats from one isolated network through to a different isolated network and allowing it to spread. Now, with these dynamic environments, you have the challenge of how do I actually go and protect each of them when they're constantly changing. And that's really the biggest challenge that these virtualization admins have. How do I provide stability in this dynamic, unstable environment? Well, what would happen with traditional security is you would actually have to go inside each virtual machine and go and install a security agent. And this is known as endpoint protection, again, where we have to go and protect every single end usage point. Now, this is highly inefficient because if you need to actually go and install something inside the VM, that means that you need to go and actually run a script or log in. Now, in virtualized environments, as the admin, you may not even have access to log into the VM for security or privacy reasons. Now, even if you do have access to the VM and have to run something, that's still going to slow down your deployment at the best case. And anytime that you start a VM and need to install something, you're already leaving it open as a security threat. As soon as you boot that VM, it's possible to inject different types of malware into the VM's memory. It really is never secure. Now, there is only one solution you can do to make sure that all of these new virtualized resources are instantly and immediately protected. And that's actually how our security product works, because we go and do protection at the host level. What we're actually doing is intercepting all of the different types of network traffic before it even gets to the virtual machine. So if there's any type of security threat, malware, antivirus that's even being passed to that virtual machine, we're going to detect it, we're going to try to block it, we're going to alert the admin, and we're going to warn people that it's coming before it even arrives. So this actually gives you immediate protection without ever having to install anything inside the VM. So if you kind of think about the data flow of how any type of information is going to get to the virtual machine, it has to go through the Hyper-V host. It goes to the physical network adapters. It then gets routed through what's known as the virtual switch. And this is a virtualized routing device on each Hyper-V host that goes and sends data from the host to the VM or from one VM to another VM. Essentially, this virtual switch is kind of the routing device that carries all of the different types of network traffic. It's going to be our single point of convergence. After it goes through the virtual switch, it sends it to the virtual machines themselves. So the way Five9 Cloud Security works is we've actually gone and injected our drivers inside the networking stack of the virtual switch itself. Hyper-V makes this extensible to software providers. And basically what this now means is any type of traffic goes into a VM or out of a VM based on different rules and policies that we define. We can choose to accept it or we can choose to block it. So essentially, we are having full control over whether that packet arrives at that other virtual machine or not. And this is where we basically give the ability to go and intercept all of these packets. We sit at the kernel level. We can do what we need to route that. And so this gives us the ability to provide protection at the host level and not actually have to worry about protecting each of the VMs individually. Now, our goal here is the best practice, and something that you really want to try to be doing in your virtualized environment is hiding security from the users entirely, abstracting it, moving it one layer down in the stack. Because what's really happening here is you're allowing non-technical users, or in some cases if you're a service provider, you're allowing the public to actually go and use your hardware. We don't want to have to worry about security. There's no benefit to you in letting your end users manage their security. I mean, sure, that's going to offload some of the work, but it adds a lot of risk. It adds a lot of complexity, and it adds a lot of variation in how secure your environment really is. The best practice is you should be managing security for your tenants. You should be updating these virus rules and definitions for them. You shouldn't expect that each of them have to log on to every VM, accept those pop-ups that come up and remind you to update your signatures. Keep them current, do the downloading, because reality is people often want to just ignore security. They say, I'm never going to be attacked, let me disable these annoying pop-ups. Now, in some cases, if you're a service provider, you may also be renting your hardware to the public, and the public might have bad intentions with how to use it. They may actually want to rent your hardware so they can do an attack, so that they could create a denial of service attack from your hardware hitting someone else. So it's really important that you want to make sure that you're protecting even against these bad users. And these bad users are smart. They're professional hackers. They know how to disable any security that's running inside that VM. But the advantage of a host-based solution is they never see that security. Even if they want to, they can't disable anything because there's no security running inside the guest operating system. It's all running within the host. And so that's really what you want to be doing here, is thinking about how you can centrally manage all of the security without having to go inside each of your VMs in your dynamic, highly virtualized environment. Now, the other best practice you want to be following in a virtualized environment, especially if you're a host or a service provider, is guaranteeing isolation and access to the resources. Making sure that all of the VMs have the appropriate CPU, memory, storage, and disk I/O that they need. Sorry, network I/O that they need. Now, this is really important to make sure that one VM doesn't starve the resources of another VM and create one of those denial of network attacks or denial of memory attacks. So you want to go and place minimums and maximums of CPU, memory, disk I/O, and network I/O on your VMs, making sure that they don't consume too much resources and also making sure that they get guaranteed a minimum amount. Now, when you're thinking about privacy as well, some of the best practices that most hosted environments need to follow is making sure that the admin doesn't access the actual VM. Now think about that. How would you go and manage security using endpoint protection if you can never log into the VM, if you can never install anything, if you don't want to have agents running there that you need to update, if you don't want to have definitions and signatures that you don't need to update? It makes management really hard if you need to respect that privacy, have that abstraction. Now, fortunately, using our security solution here, you never need to worry about logging inside that VM and installing the agent. We manage everything at that host level. And from there, we also have the ability to control all of the different I/O, giving you the ability to have quality of service and different types of throttling, making sure that VMs can't affect the host and making sure that they cannot affect each other either. Now, what we're really trying to provide here is a solution that's going to allow you to protect all virtual networks. What I'm going to show you here is one of the largest security vulnerabilities that most virtualized data centers have but don't even know about. Now, the reality is, what happens with most traditional security solutions is they're an appliance which sits on the physical network. Something like a firewall appliance, an intrusion detection appliance. And this is great for traditional environments because all of the traffic with a non-virtualized environment will get routed through this physical network. But remember, virtualization is different. We're not just sending information through physical networks, we're also sending them through virtualized networks. So it's important that we're protecting traffic on the hosts and within the host as well. Now, let's try to take a look at the three different types of virtualized networks that Hyper-V supports. The first is an external network, and that's essentially when traffic gets routed from a VM on one host running to a VM on another host. Now, this is going to get sent through that physical networking layer, and this is going to get filtered by a traditional security appliance. So host-to-host traffic, you're probably still going to be able to inspect and make sure that viruses won't spread. But then you have internal traffic, and this goes just from the host to the VM. Now notice here, it's going to go through the 5.9 security virtual switch, but it's not going to go through your traditional security appliance. So this is actually a blind spot. But the worst one here, the common one that's often unprotected, are the private networks. And a private network allows you to route traffic from within a single host from one VM to another virtual machine. Now again, if you take a look at the screen here, when we're sending that traffic, none of that leaves my Hyper-V host. None of that gets routed through my security appliance. And so what this basically means with traditional security solutions is you're leaving these private networks unprotected. What this means is that if one of your virtual machines gets infected for whatever reason, it can spread to every other VM on that host before it's ever detected through those private networks. So it's really important that your security solution isn't just monitoring the physical network layer, but also monitoring that virtualized network layer. And this is something which 5.9 Cloud Security is able to do because we sit on that physical host and we're routing and inspecting all of the traffic. Even when the VM goes from even when the traffic goes from one VM to a second VM, that's still converging through the virtual switch, that's still getting inspected, so we're still going to give you the ability to prevent these infections on the private network. Now, many virtualized environments support all different types of guest operating systems, especially if you're a host and service provider. And Hyper-V supports a variety of Windows Server, Windows Client, and Linux distributions. Now, if you have one of these diverse environments, you want to have a single set of security rules. You don't want to have firewalls for Windows and then have a whole different set of firewall policies for your Linux virtual machines, because then you have some complexity, you have some inconsistencies. So what we're able to do with 5.9 is we actually are a single solution that protects against every guest operating system, because we don't care what's running inside that guest OS. We're doing the security and the protection before that threat even gets to the VM. So if you think about how the network traffic goes, what we're basically doing is we're taking a look at the network packet and we're taking a look at the header and we're seeing that it includes information such as what protocol it's using, what the source is, and what the destination is. And using that information in the packet header, we could go and choose whether we allow it or whether we block it. It really doesn't matter what guest operating system we're using. So whether you're using supported versions of Windows Server, Windows Client, or Linux and Unix, we will go and support it. So you get a single solution that you can centrally manage regardless of what your endpoint is. Again, a huge advantage of not using endpoint protection, guaranteeing that security and that isolation before the threat even gets to the endpoint. Now, another best practice that you want to have is trying to identify threats as soon as they arrive in your environment. Now, in some cases, it's not possible to actively block the threat, but we want to make sure that we can at least alert you about it. So what we're able to do here is if you have an unencrypted data that's coming into your environment, remember that the network packet contains both a header and also the payload, the information. If the header is allowed through our firewall, what we're then able to do is actually take a look at the data that's included, and we could do a live scan of that, assuming that it's unencrypted, and try to match that against different signatures in our library. And if we detect that you have a virus or you have malware as part of this incoming packet, we can go and alert you about that immediately so you can take remediation actions. Probably the biggest challenge that we see in virtualized environments, though, around security is the impact that scanning storms have on the environment. Now, what happens, even though you're trying to go and block these threats as soon as they arrive in the data center, you still need to be regularly scanning your disks, because you could have had a threat that arrived last week but wasn't identified yet, or a threat could have spread through your unprotected virtual networks. Now, the security scans, this is actually quite a large amount of CPU and processing power. In some cases, it can take up to 30% of processing power away from the host. Now, think about what that means. If you're running a dense host, if you're highly virtualized, you're running at near full capacity, every time you do a security scan, you're going to get a 30% performance hit. So that means one of two things. That means either everything slows down and your VMs aren't performing as fast and it can trigger live migrations and different types of alerts, or it means that you have to run your hosts at less than full capacity so they can handle this scanning storm. That's obviously going to cost you more money because you need more hosts. That's going to cost you more licenses because you need more hosts. So antivirus and scanning really is a large problem most data centers have. So we've introduced our own proprietary solution that makes disk scanning in some cases 70 times faster than our competitors inside these virtualized environments. And the way we do this is using a technology in the computer science world known as change block tracking. Now in this scenario here, I have 3 disks. Some are on direct attached storage, some are on a SAN, like cluster shared storage, and some might be Hyper-V on an SMB file share. But let's say I have 3 terabytes of data here, and then I have some changes that are happening to my file system. Well, instead of having to scan the entire 3 blocks of data again, we're just going to track which blocks on the disk have actually changed, which have been edited or updated. And we're just going to go and scan those. So maybe in this case, instead of having to scan 3 terabytes, I only need to scan 30 megabytes. That's all that's changed. Well, that's going to be significantly faster, allowing me to avoid a lot of the challenges and overheads with these scanning storms. And this proprietary technology is something which only Five9 offers. So we're actually going to be able to save you money by giving you better performance and by giving you better host density as well. You want to also make sure that you're providing as much automation as possible. So get better scalability, consistent service level agreements, and eliminating human error that comes by forgetting to do these repetitive maintenance tasks. So we have the ability to do scheduling jobs, scheduling disk scans, and you could do things such as stagger your disk scans as well, so that even if you're doing a full intensive disk scan, it minimizes the impact across the environment. You also want to make sure that you're using a security solution that's designed for your hypervisor. Don't use a security solution for VMware on Hyper-V, and don't do the opposite, because each virtualization solution is designed very differently. The way it integrates with the guest operating system and the way that each of its files are managed. If you actually don't use one that's supported for Hyper-V, you can cause disk corruption. And this actually happened last summer. Microsoft released a hotfix, and people that didn't know how disk scanning worked with Hyper-V, they would run their antivirus scans and corrupt their virtual machines. So Microsoft released this funny KB article, and it said basically, yep, there's a fix. If you do your disk scans, you can corrupt your VMs. Our workaround is to basically tell you to never scan your virtual machines. So that was kind of a silly recommendation here. Basically, the workaround was saying, hey, don't protect your virtualized environment. So really, best practice, make sure you find something that works for Hyper-V. Five9 was never impacted by this issue, as we've been building for Hyper-V from the ground up. We're specifically designed to work on the Hyper-V platform. Now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex. He's going to take us through a quick demo of Five9 Cloud Security, showing you the base components and basic functionality of our solution.
Thank you, Simon. Whenever a screen pops up, you'll be able to see Five9 Cloud Security standalone major window, and we'll go over firewall intrusion detection system and antivirus functionality that we are offering within the product.
All right, you're good to go, Alex.
Thank you, Simon. So as Simon mentioned, we actually allow you to control any kinds of traffic flying within your virtual network. To do that, we integrate into a virtual switch, and of course, the very first functionality that we're offering within Five9 Cloud Security is called Virtual Firewall. This is the one that allows you to completely isolate virtual machines from each other and configure direct traffic rules for each virtual machine to communicate to each other. By default, we isolate virtual machines by applying denial approach, and therefore we offer multiple layers of firewall rules that you can apply to each virtual machine. These are all virtual machines rules. These are specific security groups and individual virtual machine rules. Whenever you create a rule, you have a great opportunity to leverage the best virtualization approach here and create firewall rules based on remote virtual machines identity. Of course, we support remote IPs, remote MAC addresses when you create a firewall rule, but of course, the most effective and the fastest way to actually create a firewall rule is based on virtual machines themselves and virtual machine identifiers. This way, creating a firewall rule becomes so much faster because you don't have to remember any IP interfaces and go through your spreadsheet, and also allows you to make this rule more secure because it never changes even if someone intentionally maliciously changes IP address inside a virtual machine. So this is the most efficient and the most secure way of configuring firewall rules within your virtual infrastructure. The filtering log that's represented for each virtual machine allows you to quickly overview what got allowed and what got blocked. And if you need to create a new firewall rule, you can also always just go over this filtering log and add rule out of any kind of a detection. The next functionality that we're going to talk about is intrusion detection system. It's actually based on Cisco Snort signatures, and this allows you to detect any malicious and suspicious network activity flying within your virtual network and do that on a virtual switch level. So within the log, you'll be able to see any kind of attack flying inside, source and destination addresses, protocols used, and priority of that kind of a threat. We notify you via email alerts. Once that's detected, it can also overview what kind of attack it is within the description field. The network traffic scanner is a part of our three layers of antivirus protection within virtual infrastructure. So network traffic scanner is one of them. This allows you to detect viruses flying on HTTP protocol within your virtual network and detect if virtual machine is trying to download or upload a virus via HTTP protocol. So this tab allows you to overview all of these detections and also take actions in case that's required later on from within a virtual machine. The antivirus that is based on change block tracking, this is the purely agentless full system scans, as Simon mentioned. And when you go over the summary information, you can see all the scan status for your virtual machines. And as a result of change block tracking scans, you can see that the scan time required for full system antivirus scan of virtual machine got reduced to just several minutes. In this particular case, you see that the latest scan on the virtual machine took us just 6 minutes, and we detected viruses on the virtual machine. And the very last component of the antivirus protection that we're going to demo today is called active protection. This component allows you to actually run real-time scans inside a virtual machine with a tiny real-time service, but this is also absolutely Hyper-V optimized because it never requires any network connection established between Hyper-V host or any other services within the infrastructure. You don't even have to have network access to a virtual machine. It's all performed via Hyper-V native technologies, including the detections information and signatures updates. With that, I would like to give my word back to Simon to go over the remaining presentation slides.
All right, thank you, Alex. That was a great demo and introduction. All right, so next thing that you really want to think about here when designing for a large virtualized environment is making sure that you have an enterprise-ready solution. And so what I mean by enterprise-ready is you need to provide high availability and redundancy through every level. So the way Five9 Cloud Security is designed is with this in mind. We have our main management server that can run directly on physical metal, or that can be virtualized running inside a VM. Now, a best practice, of course, is to run it inside a clustered virtual machine, or a VM that's running on top of a failover cluster. That way, if the VM crashes or it blue screens, the cluster can detect that, it can restart the VM or the guest operating system. Now, on the back end, we constantly keep track of all of the different type of traffic that goes into or outside of our virtual machine. And we write all of this data to a database. Now, you can use any type of database, actually, including Windows internal database. But most of our customers are using SQL Server, since they're already running on Hyper-V, and they're Microsoft customers. So again, you can use either type of database that you want. As far as management goes, we're going to go and plug in to Five9 Cloud Security. And you could go and expose that through 4 different management interfaces. You have the Five9 console, which is what you just saw in the demo. We also have PowerShell support with our own PowerShell module. So if you need automation or scripting capabilities, you can take advantage of that. We then have an extension with Azure Pack and System Center Virtual Machine Manager, which we'll talk about briefly as far as other ways that you can go and interact and centralize your virtualization security. We then, of course, have our different Hyper-V hosts, Hyper-V cluster nodes, and virtual machines that we're protecting. And so what you see here is a very basic deployment. You have the single management server, single database, protecting a few virtual machines. But in a larger environment, you're going to want to make sure that your security solution itself is highly available so that it can detect new instances, it can send new alerts, it can report on new issues, and of course it could go and share rules as rules get changed in a large environment. So what we do is we give you the ability to actually run your Five9 Cloud Security in a redundant server group so that if you have multiple instances, they can be offline, they can become unavailable, and you can still make sure that security is highly available in your data center. Likewise, since we support SQL Server, we also support the native SQL clustering features as well. So you could create a SQL Server cluster, an always-on availability set, and you could even do replication using things like log shipping or database mirroring to copy your logs to a different location. If you're an even larger environment with multiple data centers, we have branch office support as well, where you can have multiple instances of Five9 Cloud Security running in isolated areas. They may not speak to each other for a while, and then when they resynchronize, when that site-to-site connection is back up, they can copy their information, the changes, and the rules between the different data centers, making sure that everything is consistent. And all of these are requirements that you should look for inside the security solution that you pick for your virtualized environment as well. Now, when you think about monitoring all of these different types of threats, there's different traffic patterns that you need to be aware of. Now, most people try to protect themselves against inbound threats, and that's where somebody in the outside world is trying to attack your infrastructure. And so what we're doing is all of the incoming traffic, we're constantly logging that, we're constantly tracking that. Now, if you're a service provider or a hoster, there's a possibility that you could be attacking someone else if your tenants are trying to do malicious things too. So we're actually tracking all of the outbound traffic as well, making sure that you're not committing some type of security threat and impacting someone else, whether that's with or without your knowledge. And then probably the other one that's even more important as well, if you have tenants, if you have the public using your hardware, is protected against internal threats, where one of your tenants or where one of your customers is trying to take down your own internal system. So we're constantly logging that internal data and internal traffic as well. And what Five9 does over time is we create normal traffic patterns for you based on your different virtualized resources, different protocols you're using, different times of day. Based on this normal traffic pattern, you then have the ability to configure different types of sensitivity levels for anomalies. And so, for example, if you start to notice some unusual spikes where there's 2.5 times the amount of normal traffic or different protocols are being used, we can actually flag that and we can alert you, saying that something unusual is happening based on different times of day, different events, things like that. So this gives you the ability to be proactive in trying to eliminate all of these different security threats. Now, we also want to make sure that you can perform advanced analytics. What Five9 Cloud Security does is it provides security for your virtualized environment. And it provides basic reporting capabilities. But some large organizations want to go and integrate that data within other systems, within other dashboards. So we provide an extensible model that's going to allow you to do that. When we're writing our data, we use the syslog format, which is an industry standard reporting format. It includes things such as the source, the destination, the time, the date, things like that. Now, since that's a standard login format, most data analytics solutions can actually go and analyze that. So you could go take advantage of integration with solutions like Splunk or Azure Operational Insights. Additionally, if you're using SQL Server for your database, you can take advantage of SQL analytics, things like SQL Server reporting services, or publishing that data up to a SharePoint site. So we really did try to make this an extensible model so that you can go and see and understand the data as you need it. And this really ties to the best practice of making sure that you're really centrally managing all of your security. Use a single centralized database that has all of your signatures and definitions. This way, you're not going and pulling down data over the public network every time through traditional endpoint solutions. You're not worried about having them be inconsistent. We want to make sure that you're using antivirus and anti-malware signatures from industry leaders. We actually have integration with Kaspersky Lab and ThreatTrack, and part of the licensing with Five9 Cloud Security includes the licenses for these solutions as well. So you can actually go ahead, get a great security solution here, go integrate that for your virtualized environment, and then even use that for the rest of your data center. And then for intrusion detection, we use Cisco Snot, which is considered the industry leader, to try to look for these advanced problems, these unusual traffic patterns and anomalies. So we're not really trying to go and reinvent the wheel and go write these ourselves. We're taking advantage of the best available on the market. Now, as far as our integration with the rest of the Microsoft environment goes, we wanted to make sure that data centers of all sizes could take advantage of our product. If you're a small shop, you probably don't have an in-house security expert. In fact, as the infrastructure admin, you probably are the security expert. So this is a great solution for you for offloading the security burden, trying to make it easy, highly automated. If you're a large shop, though, you're probably highly virtualized and may already be using products such as System Center VMM to centrally manage all your virtualized resources. If this is the case, you can take advantage of our free plugin, which actually goes and integrates Five9 Cloud Security within VMM. So as you deploy new Hyper-V hosts, they're automatically protected. As you deploy new VMs, new clusters, they have security turned off. And you could go and manage and view everything through the centralized SCVMM interface. So you don't even have to go to the Five9 console anymore. And then most recently, we've released our plugin for Azure Pack. So Azure Pack, just as a quick reminder, is a way for you to be able to run Azure-like services inside your own data center. Basically, it's a portal that looks just like Azure and allows customers to go and deploy virtual machines, databases, things like that. Well, we've gone and integrated with that as well, so that you could go and provide or offer security as a service. So if you're a service provider, whether you're hosting the public or even your own internal customers, you can now have an option that allows them to turn on and turn off security through a single switch. Now, this is great for you if you're actually a service provider, because not only will you get better security for your own data center, you'll get better security for your customers, but more importantly, you can even go and monetize from this offering. You could have a differentiated service. Instead of charging $20 per virtual machine per month, you can now charge $25 and actually make money back. We have a large service provider, in fact, one of the largest in the world, which is using our security as a service, and they estimate they'll make over $500,000 this year by being able to offer the security as a service. So they're not even viewing this as a cost, they're viewing it as a security enhancement, plus something that they can actually monetize on as well. So it really essentially makes that security easier for the end user. They say, I want to go deploy my new VM. It's a SQL VM. Go protect it with these security settings. And finally, you always want to make sure that you're supporting the latest compliance laws and regulations, because security for these virtualized environments is different, as hopefully you've seen. You've got to worry about new networks to protect, new privacy settings between the admin and the tenants. There's a lot of unique considerations to want to have that automatic and instant protection. And now most regulations have specific laws and rules around virtualized security because they know most data centers are using it. So if you're trying to stay compliant and meet your customers' needs and expectations that you're meeting things like the PCI laws or SOX or HIPAA, you want to make sure that you're protecting the virtualized environment as well. Because hackers know how to exploit it. Hackers today are no longer high school kids. Remember, hacking today is a sophisticated organized crime that makes millions of dollars. It's professionals, it's rogue nation state, it's advanced computer scientists that know how Hyper-V and VMware are built and know how to go and exploit those different areas. So you want to make sure that you have a solution that's specifically designed for virtualization if you're in a highly virtualized environment. Because remember that if there's security breach, even a single one can really hurt your reputation and can hurt your business. Now coming up at the WPC Worldwide Partner Conference, we're going to be releasing our newest version of 5.9 Cloud Security, version 6.0. Within this new update, we have new analytics and alerting capabilities where we have more advanced techniques to create a baseline based on your virtualization traffic and detect anomalies that happen within your data center. We have new protection against different types of spoofing attack, where we're doing checks to make sure that the data is being sent by the correct components in the environment. We allow you to match IP addresses within certain traffic filtering rules so that you can make sure the resources are always coming from the correct virtual machine based on a matching IP address. You can now schedule and turn on and off your firewall rules. So depending on your business, whether you're 24 hours a day or you're only running in core business hours, you may want to enable or disable certain access throughout your data center, which you can now do automatically. We support new frame types, so if you have different types of hardware that send network frame sizes that are different from the internet standards, fully integrated, fully supported, and then even additional monitoring capabilities for 5.9 Cloud Security itself for the health of the environment. So a lot of enhancements continuing to be added within the product. Now, if you're interested in 5.9 Cloud Security, we've really been focused here on providing great solutions for security and compliance needs. We're also making sure that we're supporting our customers of all sizes, whether you're enterprises, whether you're SMBs. We're offering unique solutions for our hosting and our service providers through Azure Pack, allowing them to have security as a service while still maintaining separation between the end users and end customers. And for VDI, or Virtualized Desktop Infrastructure, we provide a security solution that meets all of their needs. So whether you're using server virtualization or VDI, we're still protecting you. Now, as far as licensing goes, we offer it per 2 CPUs, so it's consistent with Windows Server. If you go and buy a dozen Windows Server licenses for your Hyper-V host, you'd buy a dozen 5.9 Cloud Security licenses. We also have licensing for service providers as well. And what we'll do here is we will charge you per virtual machine per month. So this enables you to have some flexibility in your pricing scheme based on your own seasonal demands or seasonal needs too. Now I'm going to wrap up our final best practices here. Now what I hope you saw is that virtualized environments are different. They do have special security considerations. So you want to make sure that you're protecting your entire virtualized infrastructure. Best practices for firewall, intrusion detection, advanced threat protection, all of these things that we've discussed today you have to consider. We certainly want to encourage you to look at our solution for Hyper-V because we really offer two things that are unique in our industry. We are the only agentless solution, and we're the only solution that leverages change block tracking, allowing you to do those disk scans, in some cases 70 times faster, allowing you to get better density, better resource usage. And those cost savings are going to add up, as well as the ability to offload costs by offering security as a service. So even though we are a solution that's going to cost you money to get licensed, we're going to make sure that your servers are running better, that they're running faster, that they're more protected, and this even gives you an opportunity to go and monetize on our offerings as well. With that, I do want to remind you that we have a couple more webinars coming up. We're going to be doing some deep dives on VDI, some converged solutions, and other security best practices and designs. Here's a list of resources. You can also download this slide presentation through the meeting itself by clicking on the Handouts tab. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Reach out to myself directly, simon@five9.com, or Alex, amk@five9.com, and we'd be more than happy to go and address any questions that you have. Alex, are there any that we should discuss out loud?
Sure, we have a question from Julius on the performance side. And that definitely is the one that is so important whenever we start talking about virtualization, because obviously you're running multiple virtual machines, and of course you're interested in raising up your density. So as Simon mentioned, we actually allow you to offload all the full system scans and perform them from a host level. That really allows you to level up your density up to 30%. Because these scans are happening 70 times faster, you also save a very decent amount of time and disk IOs. As of performance from CPU and memory perspective, that varies from the individual infrastructure. If you have, well-known vendor for your Hyper-V servers, right? So just if it is a modern one, what we usually observe, just the performance hit, the maximum performance hit is usually below 15%. But once again, that may be very, very specific. I'm talking about CPU side, of course. We always encourage you to run a POC in your lab and test your real-life scenarios. But once again, we architecture and build our product with virtualization in mind from the very ground, from the very beginning for Hyper-V. Therefore, performance is optimal for all the security measures. So I think this is what we can mention on the performance side here for Virtualized.
Great. I see another question coming that I'll take now. How secure is Five9 software itself? Can somebody write a virus that's actually attacking Five9, such as the agents, the management servers, or the communication? Well, that's a great question, and that's something that we specifically try to design against. We have a lot of different types of best practices and integrity checks. So the first level of protection is around actually providing high availability for the management server itself by putting that inside a virtual machine, putting that VM in a cluster so that you can take advantage of native high availability techniques. Now, beyond actually making sure that we can restart the server, we want to make sure that we can monitor each of its individual components. So what we're able to do is we have an integrated health monitoring solution within the Cloud Security Console that's going to take a look at the health of your agents, the health of your services, the antivirus component, the change block tracking component, and tell you whether it's online, offline, and if there's a problem, what the cause could be, so that you have the ability to go and remediate it. Now, the third layer of protection that we've added as well is making sure that the data that we're actually sending across our different management servers hasn't been tampered with. So we include error checking code, consistency checking code, as we're sending the data between our different Five9 management servers and different components to make sure that that isn't spoofed. So between having high availability in the infrastructure, monitoring each of the separate components, and providing error checking for the data integrity, we're really trying to make sure that the Five9 Cloud Security solution itself provides that best level of security and availability so that the security solution stays online too. All right, Alex, is there anything else that's come through?
Yeah, actually, I think we have a question from Kevin regarding the latency of network traffic while live scanning of threats targeted at virtual machine. Let me probably take that. So as we integrate into Hyper-V Virtual Switch directly, we actually implement our filtering extension in there. We don't really feel any noticeable latency on that. Obviously, that happens because of 10 gigabit speed of Virtual Switch itself and our native integration in there. And Simon, you may also have something to add on this question, because obviously, this is coming from our native integration into Hyper-V virtualization here.
I mean, I think really, the thing that I can add here to help people feel more comfortable is the fact that this sits at the kernel level. So to kind of get a little bit more technical, within a computing system, there's really kind of two levels where the data can get transferred through. There's the kernel level, which basically means it's handled at the low level of the operating system. And then there's the user level, which is what you experience when you log into it, which runs at a higher level. Now, anything running in the user level, that's going to take significant more performance hit because data has to be translated from the computing level or, down to the CPU level up to what the end user sees. So it has to go through several different layers of security, storage, and networking protocols. But we make sure that we sit at the kernel level. We're fully integrated inside the core operating system and inside the core networking stack. So where our driver sits is just where every other type of Windows Server networking driver would sit. So we're making sure that, it plugs in just like any other plugin, right? We're not some app that has to sit on top and take up extensive processing power. We're just part of the native operating system, part of the native driver stack. So as Alex mentioned, we have very little to no performance overhead due to that deep level of integration. Well, I think that might be it, right, Alex?
Yep.
Okay, well, with that, I do want to thank everybody for attending. There were some great technical questions that we had at the end. If you have any other additional questions that come up, please again contact sales@five9.com, Alex, who's amk@five9.com, or myself, Simon, at five9.com. We'd be more than happy to continue our discussion, to answer all of your other questions, and hopefully we'll see you on some of our future webcasts coming out later this month. Once again, thank you for attending this webinar presented by Five9 Software, and we certainly hope that you've enjoyed and learned a lot about these security best practices and how virtualized environments are different than your traditional data centers.